Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We'll continue reading from Canto 9, Celestial Dynasties. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Chapter number 9, the Ganges comes to the earth. Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langhayate girim yat kripatamam vante Shri Gurum Deen Tarinam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram Hari Om Tat Sat. Shukadev said to deliver his uncles, Amshuman tried to bring the river Ganges to earth. Therefore, like his grandfather, King Sagar, he performed austerities for many years. However, he failed. So his son and their heir, King Dilip, took the task after his death. He also died without attracting Ganga to descend. Later, his son Bhagirath performed such severe austerities that goddess Ganga finally appeared before him, saying, I am greatly pleased with your austerities, and I am now prepared to give you the benediction you desire. Bhagirath bowed before the goddess and requested that she descend and wash the ashes of his ancestors with her waters. Ganga smiled and said, I want to fulfill your desire, but two difficulties prevent me. If you can overcome them, I shall do so as you ask. Pray tell me what they are, replied Bhagirath. Ganga replied, My dear king, my first concern is that the force of my descent to earth will be so powerful that if not checked, I will penetrate right through her and go down to the lower planetary systems. My second concern is that when people bathe in my water to cleanse themselves of their sinful reactions, they will deposit their sins in my water. How shall I become cleansed of their accumulated sins? If you can solve these two problems, I shall come. So, Ganga has asked two questions. Bhagirath thought for a moment, then he said, O goddess, regarding your second objection, the Lord's pure devotees who are free from all material desires, obedient to the Vedic injunctions, and who can deliver all fallen souls, will also bathe in your waters. When they do so, they will counteract the accumulated sins deposited in you. How is that possible? Exclaimed Goddess Ganga. It is possible because the Supreme Lord Krishna, who can vanquish all sinful reactions, resides in the core of their hearts. Regarding your first concern, now he is giving answer to the first question here. I will petition Lord Shiva to sustain your forceful waters in his head. He is Krishna's expansion, so powerful that the entire universe rests on him like cloth held together by vertical and horizontal threads. Ganga smiled and lifted her hand in blessing. So be it. First secure Shiva's agreement to assist me in my descent, and then I shall come. King Bhagirath bowed low before the goddess, and when she had disappeared, he immediately commenced further austerities. Standing on one leg with his hands folded above his head, he chanted prayers to Shiva. The god soon appeared before him, saying, I am pleased with you, King Bhagirath. Tell me what you desire. Bhagirath said, My lord, pray sustain the forceful waves of the Ganges when she descends to earth. Shiva replied, I will gladly accept the Ganges water on my head, for she is most purifying, emanating from Lord Vishnu's toes. So, Ganga comes from the toes of Lord Vishnu. Parikshit and the sages gasped and murmured their appreciation. Truly, Bhagirath must have performed extraordinary austerities. Shukadev continued, the great saintly King Bhagirath brought the Ganges, the deliverer of the fallen souls, to earth to where his forefathers' ashes lay strewn. She followed King Bhagirath, who rode swiftly before her on his chariot, purifying many places until she finally flowed over those ashes. Shukadev indicated the river Ganges flowing nearby, even though Sagar's sons had been incinerated due to their insult to Lord Kapil. They were freed from their offense and elevated to the heavenly planets after being sprinkled with this Ganges water. My dear Parikshit, try to appreciate the benefit accrued by those who worship her. Parikshit was wonderstruck. It's incredible that river water should have such power. Are you sure this history has not been exaggerated over the centuries? Shukadev said, Mother Ganges is no ordinary river, and there is no exaggeration in what I have related. She can liberate conditioned souls because she emanates from the toes of the Supreme Lord Anantadev. Her power is a testament to the Lord's greatness. One easily becomes liberated from material bondage by remembering Him and attains a spiritual body like His. That's why great sages devote their minds fully to His service. Eager to continue, Shukadev briefly mentioned 4 generations descending from Khatavanga. On mentioning King Rituparna, the 5th generation, he added, You have no doubt heard of King Nal. Yes, of course. He taught King Nal the art of gambling in exchange for learning the skills of controlling horses. Rituparna's son was Sarvakam. His son Saudas was also known by 2 other names, Kalma Shapada and Mitrasaha. Kalmashapada and Mitrasaha. He once made a mistake which resulted in him and his wife Madhyanti being childless and Vashisht cursing him to become a Rakshas. Parikshit was surprised. Why would Vashisht curse Saudas? He was his family priest. Shukadev replied, For a while Saudas lived in the forest. During that time he once killed a Rakshas but spared his brother, desiring revenge. The brother became the cook in Saudas' palace, and when Vashisht came to visit, he served him human flesh. Listen to what happened next. What is this? Exclaimed Vashisht, angrily pushing away his plate. The food splattered over the table and floor. King Saudas jumped back, still holding the serving spoon. Vashisht stood up, glaring at the king. Do you think I am a fool? Master, I do not know what has upset you. Please forgive me. I am your humble servant, stammered Saudas. You invite your spiritual master and have the nerve to serve him human flesh. For this grave offense, Saudas, I curse you to become a man-eating Rakshas. Human flesh, Saudas exclaimed in shock. He immediately turned to the palace guards. Arrest all the cooks and kitchen staff, he ordered. Bring every one of them here. As the guards hurried off, Saudas repeatedly pleaded his innocence. I had no idea. Please believe me. I'm not a party to this outrage, my lord. Placing his hands together, he begged Vashisht not to leave until he proved his innocence and they found the culprit. To his horror, he saw his hands were becoming hairier and his nails were growing into long claws. Vashisht's powerful curse was already taking effect. So this is the result or the reaction of upsetting the pure devotees of the Lord. The guards soon returned, dragging the wailing kitchen staff. Is this all of them? Demanded Saudas. All but one, replied the chief guard. I told you to bring all of them, said Saudas angrily. The guard said, My lord, as soon as he saw us coming, he transformed into a huge Rakshas and burst through the wall, laughing menacingly. He took us by surprise. A Rakshas? King Saudas became thoughtful. Did he say anything? Yes, my lord, replied the guard. Let my brother's soul rest in peace. I have wreaked this revenge on Saudas. Vashisht realized that Saudas was innocent. He became filled with contrition for cursing him. Shaking his head sorrowfully, he said, Once uttered, a curse cannot be revoked. All I can do is reduce its duration to 12 years. Saudas, your transformation into Rakshas will be complete by this evening. Better you leave here at once. Otherwise, your family will be in danger. For myself, I shall perform severe austerities for these next 12 years to cleanse myself of the reaction of having unfairly cursed you. Vashisht then departed. Saudas stared after him in disbelief. 12 years he looked at his hands. They were bigger. He was bigger. The guards, kitchen staff, ministers and servants looked small and puny. Worst of all, they all looked edible. Turning on his heels, he ran to the queen's quarters. Queen Madhyanti looked alarmed. When she saw her husband, What's happened to you? She exclaimed, stumbling over his words. He told her everything. She came to embrace him, and smelling her blood, He forcibly restrained his impulse to tear out her throat. She was his beloved wife. He must not harm her. He pushed her away and ran into the next room, knocking over tables and chairs. Fury overcame him. How could Vasishtha have cursed him so impetuously? Reaching for a nearby jug, he scooped up water in his hands and began chanting the Shapa mantra. Madhyanti ran into the room in an anxious voice. She said, "What are you doing, beloved? I will curse that wretch Vasishtha to also become a Rakshas. He had no right to do this to me, so now he will feel the same pain." Madhyanti placed her hand on his. "You must not curse a Brahmin, my lord. He is your spiritual master. This will be most inauspicious. Forgive him, please," specified by his wife, and desiring to please her, so thus refrained from cursing Vasishtha. But that sharp mantra had already been chanted. The water in his hand was now infused with dangerous imprecation. What could he dispose of it with his new heightened senses? He perceived living entities everywhere on the earth and in the sky. He could not throw the water anywhere without harming an innocent creature. Finally, he threw it on his foot, which immediately turned black. Queen Madhyanti tried to comfort him. She took his hand and said, "My lord, my dear husband," and he pushed her away. "I'm no longer your husband. I'm not sawdust anymore." Looking down at his blackened foot, he said, "I'm now Kalmash Pada, Blackfoot, and I am a danger to you, to everyone." He turned and ran from her quarters through the palace and toward the forest. He had to get as far away from people as possible before the transformation became complete, and he lost control of his urge to devour them. Sawdust roamed the wild forest regions for many years, killing unsuspecting travelers and forest dwellers. One day he came upon a crude hermitage where a Brahmin couple lived. Sawdust found them lying together in the act of conceiving a child. Ravenous and unable to restrain himself, he immediately seized the Brahmin. The Brahmin's wife cried out in distress. Scrambling to her feet, she pleaded with Sawdust to release her husband. She said, "O hero, I know who you are. We have heard of the curse. You are not a man-eater. You are among the illustrious descendants of King Ikshvaku of the Solar Dynasty, or the Surya Vansh, as we all know as well. Indeed, you are a great fighter and the husband of chaste Madhyanti. You should not act irreligiously in this way. Please return my husband who has not yet impregnated me." At that mention of his noble ancestors and his beloved wife, Sawdust hesitated. He lifted his face from the trembling Brahmin's throat and stared unblinkingly at the pitiable woman. His whole body trembled as he tried to fight his overwhelmingly urge for human blood. Becoming hopeful, the Brahmin's wife reasoned with him. "O king, the human form of life is meant for the good of all. If you kill the human body untimely merely for food, you destroy the much greater benefits it offers." She came closer and, taking her husband's hand, gently pulled him toward her, trying to induce Sawdust to let go. Here is a learned, highly qualified Brahmin, engaged in performing austerity and eagerly desiring to worship the Supreme Lord, the Supersoul who lives within the core of everyone's heart. Again she tugged on her husband, trying to pull him out of Sawdust's grip, imploring him to desist. "My lord, you are surely aware of religious principles. As a son should never be killed by his father, so Brahman should never be killed by the king. On the contrary, kings are enjoined to protect Brahmins. How can a saintly king like you kill this Brahmin?" Sawdust tightened his grip on the terrified Brahmin and opened his mouth, showing his frightening fangs. The Brahmin's wife pulled more forcefully on her husband's arm, trying to release him. Speaking feverishly, the wife said, "Don't do this. You are well known and worshipped in the learned circles." Overpowered by his Rakshas nature, Sawdust licked his lips and drew the helpless Brahmin close. The Brahmin's wife threw herself at him and tried to push him away from her husband. "How dare you kill this Brahmin? He is a saintly, sinless person, well versed in Vedic knowledge. Killing him would be killing a cow. Killing him would be like destroying the embryo within the womb or killing a cow." Sawdust was unmoved. Growling, he sank his fangs into the struggling man's throat. The woman waited pitifully and repeatedly pounded Sawdust with her fists. No, stop. Without my husband, I cannot live for a moment. If you want to eat him, then eat me first, or without my husband, I am no better than a dead body." Condemned by Vasishtha's curse, Vadas paid her no heed and continued to devour the Brahmin as a tiger eats his prey. The Brahmin's wife fell to the ground weeping. She shrieked, beat her breast, and tugged at her hair in anguish. Tears streaked her face, and her mouth became contorted with anger. You foolish, sinless person, because you have eaten my husband when I was uniting with him and desiring the seed of a child, so shall you die when you attempt to unite with your wife. His hunger sated, and so others ran away. The Brahmin's wife, dazed with grief, collected firewood and made a funeral pyre for her husband's bones. And as the flame rose, she threw herself into them, her mind fixed on her husband. She thereby followed him to the next world. When the 12 years of the curse ended, Saurdas regained his humanity and returned to his kingdom. However, he asked his wife to maintain some distance from him and informed her of the curse. She became careful not to entice him. Despite her precautions, he was overcome with passion one night and approached her room. Finding it locked, repeatedly knocked, calling her to let him in. Damayanti. So I don't know, before it was written Madhyanti and now it's written Damayanti in the book. Kept it locked, and she reminded him of the curse through the closed doors, urging him to return to his room. After that night, King Saurdas never again tried to have any union with her and resigned himself to remaining childless. However, he remained deeply anxious about the continuation of his dynasty. Confiding in his spiritual master, he said, I dare not touch my wife for fear of the curse. How will I provide an heir? Who will protect my people when I die? Vasishtha sighed. This had only come to pass because of his impetuosity. Still, what was done could not be undone. How could he now help the king? My dear Saurdas, Vasishtha said, many times when a king could not sire children, he would ask a suitable Brahman to produce a child in his wife on his behalf. If you agree, I shall impregnate your wife and provide you a powerful heir. Seeing no better solution, Saurdas agreed. Now it says Madhyanti again. Madhyanti bore the child in her womb for 7 years after conception. When Vasishtha was informed of her plight, he struck her abdomen with a stone and she finally delivered the child. Vasishtha turned to Saurdas and said, this boy should be named Ashmak, the child born of a stone. Shukadev continued tracing Ikshvaku's lineage. Ashmak's son, King Balika, somehow survived Parshuram's massacre of the kingly order when Parshuram attacked his palace. The women surrounded Balika to protect him, not wanting to harm him. Parshuram spared his life, thus he received his second name, Nari Kavach, one protected by women. Since he was the only Kshatriya left after Parshuram's purge, all future generations of kings came from him. He is therefore known as Mulak, or the root. Shukadev briefly named the next 3 generations of kings, and when he reached the 4th Khatwang, he said, you may have heard of this king, as he is particularly famous. Yes, I have heard his name, said Parikshit. He fought for the gods, I believe. Correct, said Shukadev. He was reputed as being unconquerable. Therefore, the gods asked him to help them fight the demons. When he destroyed the demon forces, the gods, being very pleased, offered to give him any benediction he desired. Khatawang asked the gods how much longer he had to live, and they replied that he had only a moment, measured in celestial time. Khatawang knew time passed more slowly on earth than in the heavenly planets, so he immediately returned to his residence and devoted himself to meditating on Vishnu. Parikshit said, since the gods offered him any boon, why did he not ask for them to prolong his life so he could stay in the heavens? This was Khatawang's reasoning when he offered the benediction. He first tried to connect with what was most important to him. He understood that nothing, not even his wife and children, mattered as much as realizing Vishnu, namely Brahminical culture. From childhood, he had never been interested in insignificant material enjoyment. He had always considered devotion to Krishna the greatest gain. He realized that though he could ask for anything, he had no desires He did not want the material benedictions the gods could offer, but was only interested in Vishnu. He considered how the gods were never peaceful despite dwelling in celestial regions. Living in heaven gave no advantage over knowing Vishnu, who resided in everyone's heart. Therefore, he decided to give up any lingering attachment to things of this world and instead absorb himself in remembering Vishnu in a mood of full surrender. He could do this because he meditated on how everything was insubstantial. Thus, enlightened by his devotion to Vishnu, he gave up identification with his material body and became situated in his identity as Krishna's eternal servant. This perfection is unattainable by those who, denying Krishna's spiritual form, think the Supreme is the Brahman effulgence. Only Krishna's pure devotees can truly understand his glories. As the sages at Naimisharanya excitedly discussed Suta's narration, one voice rose above the rest. Khatwang's history is most instructive for the people of Kali Yuga. Shaunak raised his hands to quieten the assembly. Turning to the sage who had called out, he said, "Please tell us why this history is so important." Khatwanga's situation was precarious, said the sage. Imagine being told you have only a moment to live in Kali Yuga. Everyone's life will be perilous. At any moment there can be a devastating war, deadly disease, or any number of hazards. However, they can learn from Khatwang that what may seem like a curse is a benediction if they take the opportunity to give up all material attachments and focus exclusively on worshipping Lord Krishna. Well said, called out the other sages. Shaunak thanked the speaker and added, "Indeed, a wise person can, like King Khatwang, see a wonderful spiritual opportunity even in the worst material reverses." So this is the lesson from this chapter for all of us. Then he turned to Suta and said, "Pray tell us what Shukadev next told Parikshit." So thank you for joining. We'll continue our reading from chapter 10, Lord Ram, next time. Hari Om Tat Sat, Hare Krishna. And tomorrow is the most sweet festival for the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, Radhashtami. Hare Krishna. Hari Om Tat Sat, Hare Krishna.